All right, welcome everybody to Alpine's World of Warehousing webinar series. Today we're going to be focusing on the topic of building efficiency, and literally we mean the building and everything within the four walls. The importance of a solid layout, a solid facility layout and distribution. If you have questions, could you go back to the previous slide? If you have questions during the webinar, please use the chat to submit those questions. And we do want you to ask those questions during the webinar so that we can engage and answer those during the webinar. So disclaimer, the information discussed in this session represents the views of the individuals and does not constitute legal advice or the views of Alpine. You should consult with your organization's leadership and legal counsel as needed for your specific situations. All right, let's jump right in. So my name is Jim Chamberlain. I'm going to be point of view, and then Will is going to give us the real world aspects of the layout design because he actually lived through this as we partnered with Will and his company for this particular project. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Hey, yeah, sorry about that. Internet cut out and came back. So yeah, Austin Miller here, the facility design engineer. So I worked on the project with Will. And we got to explore a lot of these facility, different ways we can improve flow, improve capacity, improve everything within this building. And yeah, I'd love to share, kind of how we came to that topic. So kind of the agenda, right? We're going to go through, who are we at Alpine, understanding our, current and future requirements, kind of the fundamentals of facility layout. Talk about flow, safety, and efficiency, storage, slotting, and space utilization, as well as scalability and flexibility, and how we can model that in the building, as well the tools and technology we use to achieve that. So Alpine Services, right? So as a consulting firm, we touch on a lot of different aspects of a building, right? Between systems, strategic planning. So when we're planning out our business, how are we getting there? My area is warehouse consulting. So, we're working within the four walls as well. We work in labor management. Right. So obviously here at Alpine, we leverage years of experience and have worked on numerous projects throughout this the supply chain space. When talking about facility optimization, right, we kind of have 6 different ways we can impact that, starting with our best practice assessment and working through all of these different project types in order to help you optimize your facility. So understanding the current and future requirements, right? So what does it take to design out a new facility in the best way possible? So the way we look at it is leveraging your baseline analysis, right? So how does your business operate? Looking at inventory, inbound data, outbound data, and then applying some growth projections, right? Do we want to grow our business? How do we expect our business to grow in order to get that future-proofed layout that will, stand up to the test of time, right? Based on, our design criteria, that really sets that foundation. You can see here, right? When we work with clients, we work to set what our baseline is going to be. We generally aim for 70% of our peak day. So you can see from the graph here, if our peak was in July, we'd target 70% of that to work with the majority of the days, right? I don't want to over-design the facility. I want to design for what's going to get us through most of the year. And then during those peak times, we can pull some other levers like increasing labor or increasing business hours in order to hit that extra 30%. So the fundamentals of a facility layout, right? So what are the different levers I can pull within a facility in order to best design based on the data in the business? So space, looking at the physical layout and the different equipment I can use, as well, how can labor help us increase some of these other levers, right? As well, working with systems. How does our system support our physical structure and our physical space and how we operate? So as we get into the meat here, we're going to talk about building flow, and I'm going to try and work from front to back of a facility. So talking about the dock and how we can best utilize and leverage that space and improve the flow of it. So whether we want flow through versus single sided, right? This is a big topic that comes up with our greenfield clients on how their building needs to look, and really we focus on the data here and looking at the throughput requirements. Does our business require a flow through and having two docks? Or can we leverage one dock with the support of a WMS to help us keep everything organized and keep our business running as efficiently as possible? As well, looking at inbound and outbound staging requirements, right? So, what is the ideal size of that staging to then minimize the congestion while keeping our time to put away as fast as possible, right? So, I really like to press on people, ensuring that they're doing as much work as they can while keeping the dock uncongested and moving as efficiently as possible. As well, looking at dock door optimization, so getting the right stuff loaded into the right door at the right time really saves us a lot of travel time, travel distance, and reduces a lot of our extra labor, a lot of our time spent, loading and unloading. So, looking at that dock door optimization significantly improves flows of building, and I think that's one topic where a lot of our clients, are facing issue and don't look to this solution. As well, over the dock racking. So having some storage bays above our dock doors, which is always underutilized space, and leveraging that for any long-term staging. For example, like wholesale or retail clients, where I'm picking them, 2 weeks beforehand, and then I have to stage them above the dock, as well as like non-stock storage. So think like Christmas decorations or office paperwork or supplies that we usually have in our high bay storage. Keeping those on the dock is always beneficial and just increases our storage capacity. And I know, Will, we worked a ton on kind of the staging requirements. Did you want to hit on some of the whys of how we work together?
Yeah, I'll touch on a couple things, even going back to that first slide where you talk about, what's that, balance between highs and lows and peak points. One of the things that we first talked about when we got started, was, well, hey, what are some of your historic, numbers for how much quantity you've got in the building? What's your WIP levels? What's your raw material inventory levels? And for us, that actually did not apply at all. And so we didn't have the history. We had just consolidated 2 locations into one. And at the same time, our sales team had come back and said, oh, by the way, your production targets have increased by 40%. And so, right, in a matter of a 30-minute meeting from sales, we found out that we were millions of units behind. And so we didn't have that history to say where we wanted to be. So utilizing that thought process of, hey, how do we level those floats and those layers? That was really, really beneficial in that thought process on how we went and worked through that with our, hey, what's our loads for our current parts, right? We've got a couple products that we need to, that are in the growth mode. And we've got a couple new products coming online. So how do we plan for all of that as far as that optimization? And then as well, we're a low mix, high volume producer. And so we don't do a lot of changeovers, within our production facility. So we're batch building. But our distribution is different every time. We do not have any standing orders. Every order is different. And so how we set up that pick, those pick lanes, those center lanes, that congestion and safety on the dock was a big part of the conversation in how we needed to make sure that we allocated the space, kept it safe, and kept it clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really hit that on the head there, right? It's combining the safety, the requirements, and then kind of the flow of our business, right? Handling those large QA orders, right? We were kind of unsure on how we wanted to do that until we kind of broke it down and thought about how we want to stage them. They're going to come in. What size does that need to be, right? And I think we landed on a really good solution. Awesome. So continue with building flow, right? Our storage, flow of storage. I'm really focusing on how we're picking our facility, right? So there's a few different ways that we think about picking. Right, we can have a dedicated pick zone, or we're going to have some pros and cons. We're going to have a pick and reserve that's going to help us, maybe increase our capacity over that dedicated pick zone. But our footprint of picking may increase a little bit as well. Then, going to this automation solution where we can completely maximize our picking throughput, reducing our labor, but then we're going to have a higher cost, and we're going to have some more business requirements. So on the right here, I have a couple examples from a previous client of how and the why that we looked at these different options, and then showed it to the customer and let them let them make a decision. So on the top here, we can see a real pick and reserve combined layout where we're getting about 75 lines per hour with 10.1 square feet per pallet with a $7 million rack budget. You can see the footprint here is pretty large. It's a high amount of racking. So we took a step back and wanted to look at an automation solution where we could insert the footprint of a potential future automation, which is going to help us increase our throughput of picking up to 232 lines per hour. So a significant increase in picking while lowering the density or while increasing the density of our building, right? So we went down to 9.3 square foot per pallet. So we took a whole square foot off of each pallet in the building, which was huge for their capacity gains. It allows them to grow more. As well, the rack budget itself is cheaper, which helps kind of take off of some of that automation cost. So there's kind of some of the why we looked at this kind of stuff and why we review each of these different options when designing a facility. And then as we flow into efficiency, right? So how can we stay efficient in our storage and picking? Some of the areas that we look at are the golden zone. So, picking between head and knee or shoulders and knees is going to help us reduce that time to pick by up to 40%. As well, we're going to reduce our fatigue and keep our productivity high longer into the day, which will then increase our amount of picks done. And then looking at slotting and zoning. So I know this was a big one we worked on with, Will at Tyler Coupling is how do we handle, in their example, our raw goods coming into the building from manufacturing or going into the manufacturing building, our finished goods coming back into the warehouse, and then still having our pickers operating in here and needing to operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. Will, did you want to give an example on how we kind of worked through that?
Yeah, so again with our product, it's a very interesting mix on how it works. We've got about 100 finished goods SKUs, and of those, 8 of them make up 83% of our sales. So right, we rarely have full pallets of any one part number going out. So all of our SKUs have to be set up in an ability to go through and do that pick process. So having that golden zone, not just from that high efficiency area, but what zones to slot them in, based upon what their percentage of sales are, what their usage is, just to minimize that travel time, right? Maximize our time getting things ready as opposed to walking around picking things up. That was a key part of understanding and part of that development was, right, hey, everything's got to be picked. How do we optimize that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that segues real well into, one of our biggest areas we look at is, the forward pick type, right? So we perform our storage type analysis what does our forward pick need to look like based on the volume of the inventory, how fast it's moving, the size of it, the dimensions. So making sure we tie everything back to data, and then leverage that data to then give us an optimal layout. In our experience, we see 14% average pick efficiency, 16% reduction in replenishments, and then a 31% increase in capacity. Through our projects, utilizing this method, we realize a lot of gains here. And one of the good ways that we do that is really looking at how we can best utilize our space and our rack types to then minimize all of those. So looking at the specific design requirements, what is the ideal process for picking those, and how do we save space? So in this example, you can see the difference between a very narrow aisle and then a wide aisle with bin shelving. So both of these we leverage for high SKU counts that have slower movement or they're lower volume items. So when we have low cube, low movement items, we always try to leverage a very narrow aisle with an order picker in order to get upwards of 6,000 SKUs in a single aisle, right? And this is going to minimize the footprint of all of those low moving, low cost SKUs where we don't do a lot of business. We're maybe picking them a couple times. And allows us to have more room in the building to then hold all of our faster movers and operate more efficiently. As well, we like to leverage these wide aisles with bin shelving underneath. So what this does is it gets us a high number of SKUs across multiple aisles. And then the way we make it efficient is we allow our pickers to traverse aisles at any bay location. So you can see from my example, right, say I have a pick in aisle 1, I can just hit the pick and then traverse to the next aisle. And maybe I have another pick, 4 bays up in that aisle, and then that will be my last pick. So then I can go to the next aisle and keep traveling upwards. And this is going to minimize my travel distance significantly for these, slower sea moving items that we do have in the building. And then we get into people and equipment. How do we keep this efficient? So the way we look at it at Alpine is attempting to keep all of our people movement as close together as possible. So looking at where's my employee entrance going to be, and then where is their equipment? Where are they starting their day? We're taking maybe 3 breaks in a day. So having their material handling parking next to the break room and the offices in order to keep, again, everybody from walking as little as possible and then starting their work back up as quickly as possible. And I know this is a topic we worked on a lot with Will. We had a brand new building, so we could make pretty much any decision we wanted. So I know we looked at a few different ways we could have the office and where it needed to be, for it to be most effective. Alrighty, and then the last piece that kind of ties in with the people and equipment is safety, right? This is always a big concern for us. We know it's a big concern for you. So looking at material handling equipment travel, attempting to get it to be straight with no blind turns, all of our pedestrian walkways and where they need to be, as well, even diving into material specs. So what are my weights? Do I have anything too heavy? Is anything going to be fire safety or hazardous? Are there any specific requirements around those? And then as well, sticking on that golden zone picking, looking at the ergonomics of our picking, keeping our people as safe as possible. And then I know this is a big one with Will, is new equipment training. So if we were to get a new rack type that we don't have today, what are the steps we'd have to take to get our people working as safely as possible? And I know, Will, we talked a lot about this. Do you want to hit on, kind of how the team took this and some of the decisions you guys made around this?
Yeah, it was timely in when we were having that conversation regarding safety, and then that new equipment and how it worked. And one of the things that we were doing at the time was doing a little bit of restructuring with our manpower and how we want to utilize them, and particularly. We run 3 shifts, but my second and my third shift are significantly scaled back from that first shift. And because of that, we wanted to have more of what we call like a utility operator, or a very cross-trained operator. And so when we got into that discussion on, well, what's the direction we're moving forward with on production and with our people? Well, moving into that utility trained operator, we wanted to make sure that our utilities, right, were safely trained in as common equipment as possible. And so, we did have some conversation around, hey, do we want a specialized rack, or do we want a new piece of equipment? And to minimize that training, to make sure that we were staying as safe as possible, we actually chose not to go to a more, a potentially slightly more optimal condition, but to stick with, hey, let's use the equipment that we know with, that we go with, and we know our training is going to be solid. So it was very good, open conversation. We did pull in our operations team, the production managers, the safety manager into those conversations. And so it was timely for what we were up to, but it was very, very good as far as finalizing that direction we needed to go for our greenfield warehouse.
Awesome.
Hey guys, we have a question that just came in. So the question is, does Alpine utilize a commercial slotting software, or do you have your own in-house method, algorithm, or program for slotting?
Yeah, we do leverage a tool called Warehouse Vision. So we own the tool. We did not create the tool, but that is what we use to then leverage for all of our storage type analyses and our slotting procedures.
And can you maybe elaborate a little on what that helps us to achieve versus just using like spreadsheets, Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. So what the tool does is it allows us to be to input more data and be more accurate. It's got all the formulas and algorithms built into it already, based on historic use, and it's kind of a tried and true design already. It's been used for years, so we just leverage that tool along with our own data analysis to get those optimal results. Right.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Yeah. So thank you very much. Well, yeah, that was a great, great timing, right, on you guys in being able to make all these decisions throughout your project. And then as we move out of, the flow, the safety, the efficiency, we really talk about slotting and space utilization, right? So then, with all of that improvement in productivity, how do we best utilize our space? So when talking about space, right, everything within the four walls of the building, we want to make sure we capture all those. So, it's not only just racking, it's also, the staging requirements. What ancillary areas, do we have any vast services or kitting functions or offices, bathrooms, right? And then really looking at the building as well. Different column spacings can impact, our capacity of the building. And here I just want to take an example. When we do that storage type analysis, it's going to tell us what the optimal rack density is. So should I have two deep pallet flow? Is it carton flow? So when we look at that, right, we always want to utilize that dense racking if we can. For an example here, if we go from a fully selective single select option up to all two deep pushback, we're going to see a 28% increase in capacity. And then as we include more dense racking, so now we're up to 5 deep, we're seeing a 50% increase in capacity overall. Now, this is a pretty harsh, example where I went from all selective to all dense. It doesn't usually work like that, but if you think about when I can leverage any dense racking, right, I'm going to get that 28% of the SKUs that are qualifiers for that dense racking, right? So this is where our big opportunity is in increasing the amount of capacity in the building while using the same amount of space.
An example of that, Austin, would be if you have SKUs with one or two pallets, in inventory, you want to use that single select rack. If you have SKUs with hundreds of pallets on hand, that's where you can take advantage of the deeper pushback or drive-in racking. And it all really circles back to the storage type analysis to determine what is the right mix for those different SKUs.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when we were working with Will, we were looking at the raw materials, the finished good, kind of all their volumes, and we did notice that we had quite a few SKUs that would allow us to be put into super dense racking. So that's where we took it to Will and worked with him on the different rack types that we were talking about, and how we could leverage those to decrease our required building footprint while still keeping the storage hitting that growth projection.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
one of the
you,
interesting,
you hit the nail on the head with that example where, right, we've got, like I said, of our 100, finished goods, 8%, eight of them are 83%, right? So I've got a handful of SKUs that really could take advantage of that deep pushback scenario. Same thing on my raw materials coming in, right? It marries up. So I've got a handful of part numbers where that deep pushback really came in. And in the end, we were around a 30%, 30 to 32% space savings when we took that mix of, hey, we could utilize, deep on these handful of SKUs in quite a few of those areas. So.
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely. Awesome.
one thing that jumps out at me too is when you look at this, not only the deeper storage, and the density there, but there's half as many aisles, and that's all part of the layout. So it all kind of starts to compound.
Yep. As well, I think another important factor in looking at how we use our space is our building characteristics. So what is the aisle lengths? What are the aisle widths? What is our column spacing? So working in a lot of different facilities, I see the myriad of column spacings and what architects have done. And when we best utilize the column spacing and minimize the amount of columns in racking while keeping the aisles as small as possible. We've seen up to 4% total capacity savings just from going through the facility design and right sizing the aisles to fit with the columns, right? And then this is compounded up to a $3.6 million projected revenue savings. So these are not small figures when looking at the building, especially when you're working in a greenfield like Will, and you kind of have some room to dictate where those columns are. That's when you're going to get the most amount of savings, right? When there's absolutely no columns in a bay. But even if when we're working in brownfield, and I'm left with less than ideal column spacing, being able to use these different rack types to then minimize the amount of columns in aisles is what gets us even this savings shown here. As well, the proper dock usage. So I know we were hitting on this earlier in the presentation. Do we need two docks, right? That's going to be 60 feet off of both of our walls. If we can, move down and only use one side of our building, one dock, that could be the difference of 2,000 pallets. If receiving shipping is on one dock, I can then extend my racking back. That's not a small number of pallets, and that was just an estimate, right? As you expand and you have bigger buildings, that number is going to grow. And then, scalability and flexibility. So, right, how do we plan for the future while not necessarily knowing what the future is going to be? So this is kind of the balance that we play in designing facilities. How is our business going to grow? How do we think our business is going to grow? But then also, if we don't know, what can we do to, mitigate any, potential business shifts? So, the different pieces that I kind of look at is equipment. So what different equipments can I, recommend to keep the business flexible? So we'll hit on this earlier, but being able to leverage, pushback racking that is more flexible. My requirement is a lower number of SKUs. I need less pallets per SKU to meet a 3D pushback option, as opposed to a 3D drive-in option, where that number, my business requirement gets more specific with the drive-in racking. As well, the building size, right? So how do we minimize the building size with these different rack types? We can see, from an example here, as we leveraged different rack types, we were able to lower the square foot of the building, down from what was the projected value. I know, Will, you guys were originally, before Alpine started the project, looking at, projected about 60,000 square foot building. And then after this project, we kind of worked through it, and found that really we only needed about 40,000 for the racking. So then that allows you to make business decisions, and maybe we want the 60,000 because we plan to grow the business some other direction outside of storage, or maybe now we can plan for 5 extra years of growth, or being able to make those different business decisions. I know this was a big thing for you, Will, so if you want to talk about that.
No, yeah, that's exactly it, is right. Getting what's that minimum that we can utilize. And now we're actually having those conversations. We made an assessment. Hey, where are we at? Where do we need to be, for growth? And we know we're going to add in a part family, which is going to be a handful of SKUs with a projected volume. But with all of that in there, we were still able to scale down from 60,000 plan to 40,000 plan. And so now we're actually starting those conversations. All right, well, what are we going to do? Right? Is there some incremental future planning? Is there some we're getting sales involved. Is there some incremental price points that we could introduce that might increase our volume? So are we going to fill that with racking? Are we going to make a smaller building? What other features do we need to add in or put in that? One of the things that's in there, you've got your picture at the bottom. Hey, that future technology. There's as we look to expand in stages, there's probably going to be a space in our building that we're going to call out automation footprint, whether it's an AGV type setup for transportation, or like a full-on automation rack. So I'm sure we'll have something in that blank space for future improvements. But minimizing what you need allows you to be able to have that ability to plan for the future, plan for future technology, plan for future continuous improvement ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it on the head. And this is, Will shares this in common with a lot of our clients, in how do they expand for the future? There's a lot of talks of automation, the high cost of it. How do we mitigate that cost? So, I showed down here an example of the difference between if we went with just a racking only solution, or do I implement an automation option? Maybe we start small with, maybe a portion of our SKUs go into the automation, a portion of our SKUs are still in racking, and we plan to grow into that automation in the future, as we start to chip away at the cost. And really thinking about that is, how do we want to grow the business? What is our ideal state? And then, what we can do is help you plan for that, based on your requirements. What does the volume look like of your SKUs? How do we plan to grow the business? What is our warehouse needs as we grow that business? And then that all helps you tie back and make these, usually tough business decisions, and make them a little simpler.
Austin, you've been discussing along with Will different types of racking.
Yep.
Carton flow, single select, pushback, drive-in. Are there different costs for those racking systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is one of the decision metrics that we look at is, what is the cost of our racking going to be, and how we can kind of tie that in. I know I touched on it earlier with, another project, but being able to see the cost of our racking before we implement it is going to be big. And then being able to weigh different layout designs and different alternatives against the cost of the racking is going to be pretty massive, right? And for example, with Tyler coupling, looking at pushback versus drive-in, right? Drive-in is going to be, uh, pretty significantly cheaper than pushback, but you're going to have those, higher training costs. Our operators are going to have a tougher time, adjusting to it. They're going to have to learn how to do it as well. There's more specific business needs. So yes, the data may say today 3D drive-in is great, but if our business shifts at all, it may become not the optimal solution versus pushback, which has a higher cost, but we can keep it nice and flexible. I know it's going to work with our business for a longer period of time as well. I won't need any extra training for our operators. So being able to weigh out all those pros and cons is really how we help drive these tough decisions.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, and then lastly, looking at the tools and technology. So, right, for all of our facility, layouts, we leverage AutoCAD, which allows us to take a very iterative approach. We like to show different alternatives, kind of the art of the possible. What can this look like? We almost always, start with a conceptual, and then use a crawl, walk, run approach. What does our business look like maybe year one of install versus year 5 or year 8 of install, and how do we grow into it, right? Especially with these larger buildings, larger rack footprints, higher costs there, right? How do we grow into that? As well, we can prepare conceptual designs to use for vendors for install, and allow them to take it and work from there. As I was mentioning earlier from that question, warehouse vision. So this is our data analysis tool that we use that gives us our ideal size and quantity of rack locations. As well, we leverage this for any of our slotting functions. And then another tool that we used at Tyler is the space estimator. So when you're looking at a greenfield building, being able to get a more accurate view of what the size of our building needs to be before we even start the project, right? All you need for this is just the storage type analysis. And then from that, you can already start to make some business decisions. And if I were to just summarize, these slides into kind of 3 points here, right? We always like to design with, backed by data with the end in mind, right? So what is our data saying now? What is our plans for the future? And how does that data, how does that data look in the future? As well as pulling the correct lever based on our business needs to then improve my flow and storage and efficiency, right? Everybody's different. Everybody has their own business requirements. So that's what we're here to do, is help you see and make decisions on where you can increase capacity, and maybe where you need to make some adjustments. As well, right? We're always looking to scale while keeping that flexibility, right? We may not know what our business is going to look like in 3, 5, 7 years, so we can plan for that while still allowing you to make some shifts.
Great stuff, guys. Appreciate the time. We're going to open it up for questions at this point. We've got one that just came in. Do you calculate cube utilization in a DC taking into account the clear height of your warehouse?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, right, working with layouts, clear heights are always, sometimes a challenge for me, but we always best utilize or try to best utilize the clear height based on what material handling equipment we want. But that is generally how we, solve for our elevations, is what's our clear height, and then coming down the 1836 inches based on our safety needs, and then attempting to maximize that vertical space.
Yeah, and I know that definitely plays into it when you're actually looking at different facilities. If you find a 20-foot clear versus a 32-foot clear, that's going to impact, your space estimates.
Mm.
Another question that we've got, this one's for Will. The question is, why didn't you do this project internally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right, and it at that simple level, right, I'm in the business of making heavy duty engineered couplings. I'm not in the business of doing layouts. Is it something that we could do? But sure. But if I'm spending time doing that, I'm not spending time actually improving that bottom line. Plus, it's probably going to take me 3-4 months to get through all those iterations, as opposed to 4 to 6 weeks. It puts the experts doing what the experts do. Made sure I had time to do the things I was doing, with the consolidations that were still ongoing, with the volume increases that we're targeting, and was allowed us to compress timeframes on getting the work done. So, at that top level, it's who's the expert, and could I do it? Sure, but I'd rather have an expert do it nicely and quickly and allow me be the expert at what we do here within the walls of Tyler Company.
Great, thanks for your thoughts on that. Another question that's come through is, what are some of the learnings? What would you potentially do different on this particular project? Well,
I probably the number one thing that I would have done was spent a little bit more time on the upfront internally, as far as really understanding from some of our other groups internally what we want to include, right? So our immediate thought was what's going on day to day. Hey, I've got raw materials coming in, I got finished goods going out. We know we've got a volume increase, but one of the things that did come into play, was partway through, was a meeting with the sales team. They'd come in and, oh, hey, we've got a new product line, we've got a new this. So, taking the time to make sure I talk to all the parties about some future development ideas, would have saved a little bit of time. But it ended up, causing, another iteration or two to capture that. How do those SKUs fall into the mix? Where do they come in? What raw materials? So that's really that biggest thing was, hey, we kind of had our manufacturing blinders on, and hey, we were looking inside our full walls, but you know what? Hey, we should have. Hey, let's talk to the outside sales department. Let's talk to the engineering department, the product development department, and get a little bit more of that what if feedback. That's probably the number one thing that jumps out is just make sure, hey, as we're developing this, let's make sure we're open up our eyes and open up our questions to all the departments, to make sure that we're capturing everything as clean as possible up front. Now, that being said, it was pretty, once we added that in the mix, it was pretty seamless, right? It's just, oh, let's add a few SKUs, let's do this, let's run the numbers again, right? We'll update the STA. So it wasn't like a major roadblock or a major trip up, but it was just one of those things where, going back to, it's like, man, I should have talked to those guys a little bit more before we got going.
yeah, it's great feedback to get as many constituents involved and the different viewpoints, because not any one person or department knows all the aspects of the business. So that's great. All right, I think that takes care of our questions. We've just got a couple slides left. This here is just our Alpine Services roadmap. Today we talked about everything that's going on within the four walls. We pretty much are a life cycle type of supply chain consultant, from where your building should be located, the sizing, the different systems to be put into those four walls, and then any kind of tools to help you be as successful after you've chosen your facility. And then finally, we did want to let everybody know that our next webinar is August 27th, 1 p.m. Central, and the topic is driving project success with change management, lessons from school specialties WMS implementation. And this is a very important one because a lot of times we always focus on, all the nuts and bolts, but the change management monster is probably the biggest aspect that can either make or break a project. So definitely tune into that one. But with that said, we're going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you, everybody, for participating and joining, and we will talk to you soon.